This Crystal Congress, he and his wife, Dee Dee. So we just have so much appreciation. This is the portfolio of his work. I mean, he's been in radio, TV. He's an incredible person. So rather than go through all this, let's just be in the moment and experience Ho.
And crystals to reduce stress. That is the most important thing to my mind that crystals do, because we live in a society that has such high levels of stress that stress levels have become normal. And we have crystal techniques to be used on sexual levels for balancing and for enhancing the sexual activities. There are crystal techniques for helping women that are in labor and working with children to help them grow mature. And crystal techniques for programming, for changing the way we react to things, for breaking bad habits, for bringing prosperity into our lives, and for mental balance. And there are crystal techniques for psychic development. That's what the crystal balls are about. But we have techniques, the crystal world has these techniques for balancing out the third eye, for activating the psychic sensing tool, for increasing and working with psychometry, and for even tapping into the Akashic records. And crystal gazing, from crystal balls all the way down to the crystal skulls. And for working in the dream state. There are techniques for changing the way you dream and therefore changing your reality. And techniques so that you can learn how to astral project and do out-of-body travel. There are so many areas that we've barely even begun to scratch. There's a lady, I don't know if she's here now, her name is Gloria Dodd. Gloria is a veterinarian, and she has been using crystal techniques with animals. And that's very important work, because what she's showing is that the crystals do work, that they do create changes in animals. Because with an animal, you cannot suggest to an animal that it's going to get better. There is no such thing as a placebo effect in an animal. And so she is getting these results and showing how important our work is. And when I say our work, I'm talking about not my work or crystal awareness, which is what I'm associated with. I'm talking about the work of the crystal brotherhood and sisterhood, everybody. And there are techniques for working on the spiritual levels through meditations and for meeting your spiritual guides and teachers. In Los Angeles, we have a psychic, a channel. His name is Thomas Jacobson. He's very, very good. And he channels an entity known as Dr. Peoples. And people constantly call up and say, "What's the name of my spirit guide?" And he tells them. So one day I had a time with Dr. Peoples. I said, "You know, Dr. Peoples, there are people out there who spend years trying to learn and tap into their spirit guide, and here you are. You turn around and for the price of a phone call, give it away. Where's the benefit of that?" And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, "You know, Ho, that's true." He said, "But those people may know the name of their spirit guide. They're not any closer to talking to them." The crystals have offered us that opportunity as well. And I mentioned the farthest reaches of space because, you see, there are also crystals tied in with UFOs. Paul Devereaux, who was up here yesterday and was absolutely excellent, talked about power sites around the world and talked about how many of them tie into crystals. How many crystals are in those power sites. But we also have examples of ancients who used crystals to communicate with the UFOs. I actually went to a place in Ojai and discovered a power site called Meditation Mountain. Didn't know anything about it. Went up there and received the information that this had been a place where the Indians had gone up and spoken to people from the UFOs. And on one of my tapes I tell that story, but I'm going to tell you the part that's not on the tape. A year later, when I was in San Diego, I was very fortunate. I was with one of my crystal people, and they had an Indian lady come to visit. And she was a medicine woman. And she didn't speak much English. We had an interpreter, and I tried to tell her the story about how I'd gotten to Ojai. I was brought there by the ships. I had no idea where I was going. And I told her that I had picked up that the ships had been there, and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, yes." And she proceeded to show me different designs that they used to bring the UFOs in and talk about how UFOs would land at certain points and help the old people and talk to the chiefs and the shaman. When you talk about UFOs and contactees, In the cases where we have a certain level of documentation that something really happened, we constantly hear about crystals, crystals for healing, or crystals that have information stored in them, or crystals for propulsion. And again, when we talk about crystals and UFOs, those of you who have seen the slides of the skull have seen that there are UFOs that show up in that skull. Now, I believe that the really important thing about crystals is the range of what they cover, because it can affect and balance so many different areas on our planet and in our world where we have imbalance and stress. And you'll never see world peace until you see inner peace first. At one of the other lectures, somebody stood up and asked, why are crystals coming forward now? I personally feel that crystals are coming forward now, that the crystal consciousness is raising now, because crystals are nature's gift to man. And perhaps crystals are man's last good chance to balance out himself and balance out the planet before nature does it for us. See, I like to believe that nature offers all species that are on their way out an opening door, a chance to bring themselves back. I like to think they did that with a dinosaur. I like to think that God and nature, however you wish to look at it, turned to the dinosaur and said, okay, we're running out of vegetation, so here's man. And the dinosaur looked down and said, oh no, he's so small and scrawny and bony and so close to the ground. And so the dinosaur is gone, and here we are. Maybe nature offers every species a chance. And man, because of the way he's developed, because of the mind, and I think that the mind is the big tool, maybe nature came forward and brought us the crystals so that we could use them to balance out the planet. Now, I told you I didn't want to come up here and be a crystal teacher and teach classes today, because that's what I do every day of the week. So if I have a real message for you, I'm going to give it to you and make it short and sweet and get off. And that's this. We have spent 3 days talking about crystals as tools. In our haste to become crystal experts and crystal scientists, let's not forget that crystals are not just tools for health and for wealth and for wisdom. Crystals are life forms. Crystals grow. They grow very slowly, but they grow. Trees grow very slowly in the vegetable kingdom, but no one in here would ever say that that trees were not alive. Well, crystals grow very slowly in the mineral kingdom, and they are alive. Scientists talk about oxygen-carbon life. I think that's marvelous. I can't make head or tail out of that because I'm not a scientist, I'm a metaphysician. But the one thing that I've observed is that everything that is alive has water in it. Anything we consider to be a life form has water. And what is crystal if it isn't frozen or fossilized water? And if crystals are alive, then they have a consciousness. And most of us in the crystal field know that. Here's a phrase most of you have heard. The crystal knew my name. How many times have you walked by a crystal table and seen someone pick up a crystal and go, this crystal knows me? See, we tell people that when you don't know logically how to pick a crystal, you pick it by intuition. You trust your inner guidance to pick it. But I don't believe any crystal goes home with anyone it doesn't want to. I have too many stories of people who have lost crystals that should not be lost, where they've put a crystal on a dining room table and the next morning it's gone and there's no one else in the house. Or people who know just what pocket they put that crystal in and it's gone. Crystals don't stay with anyone they don't want to. And I've said in my classes that crystals still grow. And people look at me and say, they still grow even though they've been taken out of the ground? I go, yes, I think they still grow. And people laugh because science wouldn't acknowledge that. But my classes still come back 2 or 3 weeks later and say, "You're not going to believe this, Ho. But I put my crystal into the pouch, and when I came back later on, there were little baby crystals on it that weren't there before." Now, I was going to do a presentation called Crystals and Sex, and I put about 100 hours of research into every class I do. So I was going through...
I heard that.
You can take that any way you want to. I was going through a number of different books, and I couldn't find a single book that mentioned crystals and sex. And I came across one, and I was really excited because I had no written published material to work with. And I started going through the book, and I came to the section on crystals and sex, and I stopped just that quickly. There was one paragraph. It had nothing to do with human beings. What it talked about were people who take 2 crystals, put them in a pouch or in a drawer, come back a week or so later, and there's 3 of them. So I know that my classes aren't the only ones that are experiencing this. Crystals are life forms, and they grow. You know, I was thinking earlier, I saw a lot of people taking photographs of the crystal skull, even though everywhere in the room it says not to. And I think that's very funny. I'm willing to bet that none of those photographs come out unless the crystal skull really wants them to. Crystals are a perfect balance of the 4 elements. When I was growing up in England, I used to have to take scripture classes, study of the Bible. And every year, I don't know how we managed this, but every year we always got back to Genesis again, never got further than Kings. And we get to Noah, and we talk about the sign that God left after the great flood. You remember? God left a sign in the sky of a rainbow. And I used to go, why a rainbow? I mean, I'll be honest with you folks, if I were Noah and God had turned around and just destroyed the earth with a flood and say, listen, I'm going to give you a sign that says I'll never do that again, I would like it in writing on paper so I can show it later on and not just trust it to a rainbow in the sky. And I was just, for years, drove me crazy. Why a rainbow? And then it hit me. A rainbow is a perfect balance of earth, water, fire, and air. If you don't have that perfect balance of all 4 elements, you don't have a rainbow. And I can only think of one other perfect balance of all 4 elements, and that was the crystal. Because without water, fire, earth, and air, you don't have crystals. And isn't it true that the best crystals always have rainbows in them? Now perhaps some of you can understand why I tend to be a little skeptical of people who say if you take crystals and hack off a little piece here and hack off a little piece there, it's going to be a lot better than just a natural stone. Because I don't think anybody can take a crystal or do something in a laboratory and do a better job than nature did in 25,000 years. There's a new age coming. That new age has already started. And that new age will deal with peace on earth, but it also deals with respect for all life forms, whether they are visible or invisible. That is why, at a time where crystals are at an all-time high, medium and channeling is at an all-time high, UFOs are coming back in droves, because the walls between the different dimensions are starting to come down, and that new age deals with the respect and communication with these different life forms. And we of the Crystal Brotherhood and Sisterhood are the guardians of this new age. Now in a few moments you're going to see a slideshow by Carole King. They are beautiful crystal slides. I hope you stay for them. And as you watch them, please keep in mind, crystals are life forms, and they need to be respected as such. And as Sammy put it so beautifully the other day, crystals need touched. Crystals need your love back. Doesn't every life form need your love back? Isn't that what peace on earth is really all about? Bless you all. Thank you very much.